Hey, welcome to the Digital Remodeler Podcast. So glad you've chosen to join us today. And with me is John Rogers, the Successful Remodeler. And glad to have you with us, John. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, John, tell us a little bit about your remodeling journey. I know you have kind of been full circle in the journey, and so kind of take us start to where you're at today.
Yeah, well, it's a long journey, so I'll break it down as quick as I can. So in 1996, I started my remodeling company. We kind of did, basic repairs and home maintenance kind of stuff. To be honest with you, it was a lot of grunt work and torture. Um, I'd only been in the industry at that point for a little over a year. And my previous business experience really set me up for, knowing how to run a company, knowing a lot about numbers and a P&L and that kind of thing and managing people. But clearly I was new to the remodeling industry. The company that I worked for a while, I had a tool belt on and worked for them as a carpenter. So essentially, when I started my company, I kind of started a company where I could have a job because I didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. I loved being outside. I liked the nature of the work. Um, as I said in the beginning, though, a lot of that grunt work was really kind of torture, replacing fascia and soffit and that kind of thing. So anyways, fast forward a little bit. We got to do a little bit nicer projects, and we did some smaller kitchen renovations and bathroom renovations. And like many companies, I just kind of worked my way up the food chain, so to speak. Obviously, we did a good job with most of the projects that we did. I'm sure there were some that I could have done a lot better job knowing what I know now. But for the most part, we did a good job as we went, and we're fortunate to get better and better opportunities. As I continued to do that, I'm looking around and I'm looking at, everybody gives free estimates. And I just hated that idea from the beginning. There aren't very many professions out there where someone can call a professional and get an estimate or get anything from them for free. So that just never set well with me. In the beginning, I thought, well, I have to be like everybody else. So I just kind of went along with the crowd, but I didn't like it. And as time went on and we began doing more and more kitchens and bathrooms and those type of renovations, I looked at the landscape and I looked at interior designers that are getting paid for their time, and they're creating designs that the interior designer's main objective was to design something that the client liked. Not necessarily buildable at the reasonable price point that the client wanted or anything else, but something that they liked. But they got paid for their time. And then I'm looking at architects and they get paid for their time. And similarly, their job is to design something that the client likes, not necessarily that they can afford, but that they like. And so I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, there's got to be a better way. Well, around that time, I came across something called the Big 50 and the Big 550. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but the Big 50 and the Big 550 rank the largest renovation companies in the country in those two different categories. It's put on by a magazine. And I'm looking at these guys and I'm looking at their sales dollars. I'm looking at what kind of projects they do, what their average ticket is. And I see something that's just very interesting to me. And it's some of them are design build. And I'm like, okay, what exactly does that mean? I mean, I kind of know, but what exactly does that mean? I see some that offer free estimates still. I see others that once I dig into it a little bit, like, they go out and they look at a project one time, they tell them what kind of ballpark price it's going to be, and then everything else costs money. It's like from that point forward, you're getting paid for your experience and your professionalism. So anyways, I'm looking at all these different guys. I'm thinking, okay, I want to do this differently. And that's what led me to, honestly, I guess probably about 2009 was really when I started making the transition towards getting paid, essentially getting paid to write an estimate for people. We didn't call it an estimate, we called it a contract. We had a deliverable, so they were getting something for their money. But that's kind of how we made that transition. I went from being like the one truck Chuck. I don't know if you're familiar with that term or not, but I went from being one truck Chuck to a couple of truck Chuck, and hired an interior designer who happened to be my wife, a design assistant, and kind of slowly grew the company. And frankly, I did all of it out of cash flow. I didn't go into debt to do any of that, fortunately. So anyways, continued to expand that, and we did it on the administrative, we'll call it, side of the company. We didn't do it out in the field. We had all subcontractors out in the field. And as I'm sure you know, that can be a challenge, but when you find the right ones, it's gold, because you're getting fixed prices per unit from them. You're able to write a contract quickly because you have fixed unit pricing with all of your subcontractors. And frankly, you can get paid to write construction contracts that are super detailed, super thorough, and then basically build it on paper, and then go to somebody's house, install it at their house. And if there's any variation to the scope of work, you get paid in a change order. And so frankly, it's the way to make money in this industry. And I did that for a while. And then in the long second half of that story short, in 2019, I decided to list my company for sale. And so in early 2019, I listed the company. And by October that year, I had a cash offer and cashed out. And here I am today.
Excellent. And now you're actually consulting with other remodeling contractors, correct?
Yes, and that's something honestly that I've done for a long time. I like helping people. It's just part of the way I'm wired. And in the remodeling industry, it was helping them remodel their homes. And then sounds kind of corny, kind of like the Successful Remodeler name, but now I get to help remodelers remodel their business. And I learned so much, and it was just so painful, financially painful many times. We can just be so slow to change as human beings, much less remodelers. I mean, there's some terrible analogies out there about how we just like to lose over and over and over again before we finally reach the tipping point of pain, to where either we just shut the door and walk away, or we change. And so, I like helping people, and I've been doing it, really helping remodelers for a long time. But after I sold the company in 2019, took some time off, evaluated what I wanted to do next, did a few things, built a few new houses, blah, blah, blah. But this is what I enjoy doing. I enjoy helping other remodelers, just really learn about the industry and about their company, and frankly, how to be successful. And that's how I came up with the name, The Successful Remodeler.
Fantastic. Well, you brought out a lot of good stuff, so let's kind of unpack some of that. So let's kind of start with something you just hit on, some really painful lessons along the way. So if you were to name off, maybe the top 2 or 3 painful lessons along the way, what would you say those were? And what were the takeaways from those lessons?
Yeah, so I'll be general and I'll be specific. So, generally, the most painful things that I think we do is number one, as remodelers, I think we think we have to remember everything, forget nothing, and be never make a mistake. And that's just prideful arrogance, quite frankly. And so because of that, if we don't have a thorough scope of work that we're giving a client that says, they're going to get 12 can lights, 3 dimmers, 2 switches, and 4 outlets. If we don't give them something that specific, when the scope is different and the client says, oh, well, we talked about 7 dimmers, not 4, then you're like, oh, yeah, you're right. And we just gave away 3 dimmers. And so, because the subcontractor is going to get paid, right? I mean, he's going to make his money. We're the ones that lose. So if we don't have a specific scope of work, then in that situation, we feel foolish saying, no, actually, we didn't talk about 7, we talked about 4. And if we don't have that specific scope of work, we don't have something to back up. So if we have a specific scope of work, then we can rely on that contract, because that's what it is. It shouldn't be an estimate. Like, what is an estimate? So an estimate and $5 will get you a cup of coffee. So we should have a contract with people, and it should be very specific. And we should, our job would then be to deliver that contract to them, all of that product. And if there's a variation in that, we get paid for the variation. Or if it's less scope for whatever reason, then the client gets money back, so to speak, or doesn't have to pay for it. You get my gist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And then, let's also talk through, you brought up the place you started, free estimates. And it seems like that's a place a lot of people go. And one of the things that is critical is positioning. And the way you even start that conversation with the homeowner is a positioning point. And so let's talk about that. When you began to say, you know what, we don't do free estimates. This is how we operate. How did that change your positioning in the marketplace? Did it change the types of projects you started to bring in? Did it change the quality and caliber of homeowner you were dealing with? What were some of the changes you began to see as you changed the positioning?
Yeah, very good question. Well, it was a slow process with me doing that, because just like I'm sure anybody else out there that's going to listen to this that gives away free estimates, they're going to think, how can I charge for giving somebody an estimate? Well, number one, let's not call it an estimate, let's call it a contract. And then we're not just charging them to give them a contract, we have to create a deliverable. And so we have to give them something that they can put in their hands that's tangible. And so those are the first 2 mindset changes, if you will. And then we have to manage their expectations, the client's expectations. So we have to craft how we're going to discuss all of this from the very beginning. Because most clients, if they're getting your name as a referral and they haven't been to the website, if you're not advertising all of this, so to speak, or positioning it properly on the website, they're getting you as a referral. They may not know that you charge for your deliverable, whatever it is. And so you have to know how to communicate that to them. And, this is not going to be for like your basic repairs, right? You're not going to, we're generally not going to be able to position ourselves to charge people for writing something for our general repairs. Now, there is a way to do all of that for something a little bit larger that's general repairs. And we could talk about that separately. What I'm talking about right now would be more towards like kitchens and bathrooms and those renovations that require more process, if you will, to put together. So I used to go out and I'd run out and I'd look at your kitchen, Carl, and I would talk to you about it. I would exchange ideas with you, so on and so forth. And I'd run back to the office and I'd squirrel out, an estimate for you. And it might be trade by trade. Not a lot of details, but some details, a lot of allowances, so on and so forth. Then I would send that to you. I gave it to you for free, so you probably don't value it too much because you got it for free. Secondly, the due diligence of it was free, so I didn't put too much time into it. I tried to put as little as possible. And then if you said go on it, Well, then I got to scramble to figure things out and so on and so forth. So you get the gist of it. We all know how that process goes. So I developed my system of how I would do it, and which was basically, Carl, I'll come out to your house and I'll look at your kitchen renovation. I'm sorry, let me back up for 1 second. From the first time you called me, Carl, I would have a conversation with you. First, I'd pre-qualify you to make sure you were qualified to do business with me, not me to you. I want to know whether you're qualified to do business with me. Secondly, I want to make sure you're in my area, all of those kind of things. And then I'm going to ask you about your project. What are you hoping to do with your project? What are your plans? So on and so forth. Go through that pre-qualification process. And then, I'm going to have some conversation and some dialogue with you about that to make sure that I can listen. And I'm going to repeat some of those things back to you so that, I can listen. We make sure that we can communicate well with each other. Because if we have a hard time understanding each other, even right from the very beginning, we're probably not going to be a good fit for each other. So I want to see how well we communicate. So then I might say, and this is where I go next, without fail. So Carl, how much are you hoping to spend on your kitchen renovation? And that's the way I phrase it, because it isn't a budget. What's your budget? I mean, a budget, never mind. We know what a budget is. What are you hoping to spend on your kitchen renovation? And if you tell me $60,000, I'm saying, okay, Carl, well, for our typical kitchen renovation, for the projects that you might see on our website, those are really going to range more like the $100 to $125, $150,000 for the typical kitchen renovation for us, not including appliances. So, how do you feel about that? Is that a number that you can ratchet yourself up to, or, are we not a good fit for each other? Something like that is what I would say. And if you say, well, I wasn't quite thinking I'd spend that much, but maybe I would, then I'd be okay, well, great. So let me tell you about our process. And so I'll come out to your house, Carl, and we'll look at your project a little bit more in detail, talk about it all a little bit more, so on and so forth. And then, I'll get back to you generally within about 24 hours and give you what I think is, the ballpark that we can be in to do your project. And again, not including appliances. Appliances can just have such a huge range. After that, if you want to move forward, then I'll send you a design contract. And the deliverable for your design contract is going to be, we'll come back with my interior designer, CAD technician. We'll do all the drawings, all the design work, pick out all your product for your renovation. Based on what we're talking about right now, say the design contract is probably about $3,500, $4,000, and then once we get that deliverable back to you, that belongs to you. But I'll be honest with you, 9 times out of 10, people move forward with us because the design process is so thorough. You just love working with us, and then we'll move forward and go into construction. So that's a lot of words, and I know I went on for a long time, but that was kind of the pitch for the whole thing and explaining it all. And then as far as like the people that we started working with, obviously we started working with a whole lot better clientele when we started doing that. We really changed our whole objective in the marketplace with what we looked like, what our website looked like, how we communicated with everything. We took it to a much more professional level, if you will, with everything we did. We increased our margins, we increased our markup. In the beginning, design was kind of a loss leader for us. Meaning that we didn't really make any money on it in the beginning. But then that continued to increase to where, we were making money in design and making money in construction.
That's good. Yeah, one of the things that I appreciate about what you were saying there is you started with pre-qualification.
Mm,
Are you even qualified to work with me? And I think that's one of the mindset shifts that so many remodelers are struggling with,
yeah,
to become the hunted and not the hunter.
yeah,
And that is a positioning piece, and that is a mindset piece, that it is a privilege to work with you.
yeah,
And I think sometimes there's such a fear that if I turn away somebody, oh no, I'm going to lose out. But the truth is, and you, I think, can attest to this. You're deciding really who you keep, more so than who you're turning away, and that's, I think, of great significance. I love the other piece that you said there, though, and I'm picking this up as we talk. And it really comes down to being very meticulous and detailed,
yeah,
in your conversations, in your documentation,
sure,
really removing the ambiguity and removing blurry lines, if you will,
yeah,
from those interactions. And so let's kind of talk through this a little further as well. When you remove that ambiguity, I would think one of the uh, outcomes of that is higher customer satisfaction, which
absolutely.
leads to higher referrals, higher repeat business. Can you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, you know, I would say, let's see, so if we started transitioning towards that design build model in 08, 09 was when we started moving that way. I would say we really started marketing sufficiently by about 2012. So really, before that, everything was word of mouth. Very rarely did anything come in through any marketing efforts because we were pretty limited in what they did, or excuse me, what we did to attract those clients. Um, but yes, I mean the quality of the client, repeat business, higher margins, for everything that we did. But a key is that we had to deliver at that level too. You know, we couldn't just say we were doing all of that. We had to actually do it. And just like anybody who's a little bit older knows, we look back at how things were done with fondness and we remember them better than they were. We also often, and I don't care who we are, this is kind of a true thing that we have to think about in order to close the gap on. And that's the gap between who we say we are and how we actually are. So, like, we might say that we can deliver a white glove 5-star experience, but unless we do that, like 9.5 times out of 10, that's not really who we are. So we have to make sure that in order to get those higher profit margins, in order to get paid for writing a contract and not do anything for free other than come to Carl's house one time, wave my arms in the air, make sure we like each other. That's the only thing for free. Everything else we get paid for. In order to do that, we really have to close the gap on who we say we are and who we actually are, and make sure that we're delivering that white glove experience. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. So that brings up a great question then. How do you raise the level at
Hmm.
which you perform, at which you're delivering, to meet those standards? So how do you raise that level consistently, across your organization, across your systems? What were some of the things you had to put in place?
Yeah, another great question. It was a process that took a long time and continually evaluating and reevaluating. So in no particular order, how I would answer that is having documented systems. That's really the first and the biggest priority. Because if you're going to bring a project manager aboard, an interior designer, an estimator. We call him an estimator still, although he's writing a contract, because a contract writer doesn't quite make sense. So we still call him an estimator. So if you're going to bring these people aboard, you can't verbally give them all of their instructions about their job. So you have to have their job descriptions in writing. Maybe you don't have it for the first one. And so the first estimator you hire, or the first designer you hire, you have them write their job description as they're learning their job. And that takes discipline to make them to do it, and for them to have discipline to do it. But anyways, so you have to have job descriptions. You have to have your process in writing. And then if you're going to use subcontractors out in the field, and well, it doesn't matter whether they're subcontractors or employees, but they have to be able to listen. They have to understand how the process works. That we're giving the client a price, and for the electrical, using that that example again, for the electrical, this is exactly what the scope is, and this is the price that I'm going to pay you, Mr. Subcontractor, to do the work. Do we agree on that? Yes. Okay, great. Now, these things are extra. We don't have those included in our contract. So I need a price on those now so that I can do a change order with my client before we do those items, so that I can get paid on that and you can get paid on that. Because if you don't do that, neither one of us are going to get paid on it. So that's kind of how you manage that subcontractor and that pricing and that scope of work aspect of things. And you have to do that at a high level in real time in order for that to work. So you have to have processes similar to that in place in order to be able to operate at that high level. You have to have subcontractors that will do unit pricing, because if you have to take every sub out to the job to have them look at the job, and have your contractor day out on the project, it takes too long to get a deliverable together. So per unit pricing is the way to go. And a lot of times subcontractors aren't willing to take the time to do that, although it benefits them in the long run, because then all they have to do is show up at the job. They don't have to price anything for you. Anyways, I could go on and on about all that. So raising the bar is, finding subcontractors who will work the way you want them to work. Having the goal of replacing wood subcontractor, at least one, every year until you have all subcontractors that you like. I mean, just every year in December, look at your list of subcontractors and say, who gets the axe this year? Same thing with employees. Replace one employee every year until you have all of your employees that are people you love and people that do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it. And honestly, that's probably the biggest key to all of it, to raising the bar, is, managing a client's expectations about who's going to do what and when, and then having subcontractors who do what they say they're going to do, when they say they're going to do it, for the price that's agreed upon that they're going to do it at. And, just managing the client's expectations about all those things. So I think that's really how you raise the bar. Because if I meet you at your house, Carl, and I tell you that this is exactly what we're going to do, and then we don't do it, well, then there's a gap there. And it's pretty easy for me to see that gap. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And let's talk about maybe the harder bar to raise. How do you raise the bar on yourself, John?
Well, that's a good question too. So first off, if you're a people pleaser and that's your nature, you need to get out of the business. Because if you're a people pleaser, you should just go buy an ice cream truck, because having an ice cream truck is the only thing that's going to make everybody happy. So if you're a people pleaser, get out of the business. I can't say that enough, because it's going to be very hard for you to run a business like a business. I think that raising the bar on yourself, I think that setting some goals, all that standard kind of stuff, is important. It is. But I think having a drive, having a motor that runs at a pretty high rate, is kind of a necessity. And I think a lot of us have that. A lot of us in this industry have that. Otherwise, it'd drive you in the ground and you wouldn't last very long. But having that high motor, and I think that back to something I said a few minutes ago, if I tell you this is exactly what we're going to do, Carl, and then I don't do it, and you say something about it, well, I kind of feel dumb when I don't do that, you know? So it's kind of, let me give you the stick so that you can hit me with it kind of thing, which really drives me then to do what I said I was going to do. So
Absolutely.
I
So
don't know.
great,
My best answer to that one.
great answer. So, John, if somebody wants to connect with you or learn more about you, where can they do that?
Well, like many people out there, like when they first start their business, here I am talking about all this stuff. And I don't have a website. I have like two or three, four, five. I have about five people that I work with right now. And so just like I was, and just like some of your listeners probably are, maybe they have a website, maybe they have this, maybe have that. I don't have anything right now. I have a Facebook page where I have just a little bit of activity and a LinkedIn profile. So you could look me up at the Successful Remodeler on Facebook or on LinkedIn and hit me up right there. And maybe Carl will help me build a website that is as professional as I really am, even though I may not look like a professional out there in digital world right now.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's been a great conversation, John, and been great having you. And we're probably going to do some more of these with John. He and I have discussed. We're going to pick some topics down the road that we think maybe have helped to you, the listener, and dive into those. You get the marketing perspective from me. You get the owner's perspective from him. And so look forward to having John on future episodes. So, John, thanks for being a part today, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you, Carl.